Hello, and welcome to this month's Whiskey Me live tasting. Except it's not live. We do apologise for that. This is a pre-record due to issues with logistics and dispatch and other boring things like that. But think of it like a Christmas gift that is arriving slightly later than expected, but nevertheless, it's here. We are going to have a great tasting. You won't be able to ask any questions, but you will be able to enjoy your drams, listening to experts talking about this month's whiskey. So we are going to kick things off as usual with our single malt Scotch, which this month is Old Pulteney, a return to Old Pulteney. We've got Stuart Baxter, and then we're going to move on to Bluegrass Distillery in Kentucky, where we've got Maggie and Ben, which we'll introduce in about 10 or 15 minutes. But without further ado, let's say hello to Stuart. Hey, Stuart.
Hey, Tristan, how you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for joining us. Again, how many times have you done this now? Is this your third?
I think it's the third. We've done Pulteney once before, and I think Balblair before that as well. Yeah,
so we've only done Balblair once, haven't we? And then this is the second time we've done Old Pulteney.
Yeah, we did Huddart, I think, before this. This is the first, the Coastal Series one we're doing now, yeah.
Well, thanks for coming back. And I mean, as I've said to you before, Balblair and Old Pulteney are two of my favourite distilleries. And if I had to pick a part of Scotland, it would be the northeastern Highlands. It's just where all my favourite drams come from.
Good. Yeah, no, it's a really incredible part of the world. And thankfully I get to drive there like 5 times a year. But that A9 is becoming more insufferable every time I do it.
Where do you live?
So I'm in Glasgow. So it's about, 5.5, 6 hours to Pulteney.
That's
so
crazy.
usually we stop off at Balblair on the way.
Yeah. That is so crazy that you can be in Glasgow and you can drive 5.5, 6 hours north and you're still not at the northern bit. Nearly there.
Nearly there. Exactly. Yeah, you've got another 20 minutes to John O'Groats.
Yeah. It's very far north. Well, let's talk a little bit about the distillery and about Wick, maybe, just for anyone who's not been around when we've tasted Old Pulteney before and maybe doesn't know much about the distillery.
Yeah, so Wick was home to the shortest street in the world. So we'll start with that. So Guinness World Record, shortest street in the world, Ebenezer Place, number 1. It's 6 foot 2 inches, so it's actually slightly taller than me, but it is the Guinness World Record shortest place in the world, which is always a wild fact that it's in Wick.
Ebenezer Place is cool.
Yeah.
That sounds like the sign is about 6 foot wide, right?
Yeah, it's crazy. So it's literally the front door of a place, and it is a registered address. So it's not in some random street in Bangkok. It is in Wick, Scotland.
Wow.
But the distillery's been standing there since 1826. But the one thing that we always talk about with Old Pulteney is that flavor profile, that really unique thing that a lot of people who are listening now will know. And it's really apparent in the 12-year-old, especially with the new harbour that came out. That kind of teal bottle, if anyone's seen it, which is majority first fill, but it's that real minerality. I don't want to say saltiness because I think it's not just sodium chloride table salt. It's not that Saxa white shaker thing, right? It's a bit more than that. There's a texture that comes with it. I always kind of attribute it to Riesling, dry Riesling white wine. There's a texture, there's a minerality, there's an essence that comes with it, and that's something that we attribute to Old Pulteney very readily. But today we're talking about port cask, right? Specifically.
Yeah. Just that minerality. Where do you think that comes from? Because it's so easy to just kind of attribute it to the sea, and Wick's got this long sort of herring fishing industry. I understand that a lot of the distillery workers back in the day were basically fishermen and kind of worked in the distillery part-time. So It's really easy to kind of go, oh, well, it tastes like the sea. But, at the end of the day, it's still made from malted barley and yeast and water and wood, and not made from seawater, we should add. So, how does that get in there? Are we kind of imagining things, or is there something about the place is there something that allows that briny air or minerality to sort of seep into the cask? Or is it something more intangible, like, it's blended, the flavor profile is made and blended according to the taste of the sea, because that's what people are used to around those parts?
Yeah, no, it's. I remember doing a tasting in the States, and the guy put his hand up and he was like, "Oh yeah, they age it in herring barrels, right?" Like that's what I was told by the distillery, and I was like, "I'm sure that this has been paraphrased somewhere. That's some Chinese whisper if I've ever heard them." But No, it's quite simple and fairly romantic in that sense. So about like 80% of the casks that go into or earmarked for single malt whiskey for Old Pulteney are aged at the distillery. So 80% of your liquid, you're seeing it is aged at the distillery, which is a real benefit for being the kind of size of distillery that we are. So all of the casks aged at the distillery, and we are like a stone's throw away from those kind of cliff edges. If anyone's ever seen videos or photos of the Caithness Coast, we are like a stone's throw away from them. So over like 12, 15, 18 X amount of years, you are breathing in that minerality.
Yeah.
And I did a tasting in Germany, I think it was like 3 years ago. And a guy said, salt crystals can't permeate a cask. And I was like, that's the geekiest thing I've ever heard in my life, but a very cool note, especially for us, right? And it's true, they can't permeate the cask. And I think that's why I always kind of move away from just saying salinity and saying minerality, that there's more of a romance to it. So it's something it's this essence. It's not just like the three ingredients. There is also that place. And we talk about terroir and wine, and we can't talk about it in spirits, but and not in the same way and not in the same definition, but I still think that we can talk about geographical location genuinely having an impact on Old Pulteney's flavor profile. In that.
Yeah, I think there's something there in the kind of sensibilities of the people that make it. And, I think this is true in Scotland, where you travel around and the products change depending on the location, and there's something about the environment that ends up in the liquid. But I think it's proven even more when you visit, for example, like mezcal producers in Mexico, and you start to get the flavor of corn and chili in the product. And, you visit, we're going to talk about bluegrass and American whiskey soon. You start to get some of those like dessert caramel kind of qualities, you almost talk about American pancakes and all that kind of thing. There's something about the local palate that ends up informing the flavor of spirits, and I think it's nearly always subconscious or unintentional, but nevertheless it happens. And I just wonder with Wick, and it's like, it's the busiest herring port in the world at one point, I think, wasn't it? And you wonder if like that taste of the sea, and practically everyone there would have been living off seafood and smelling sea air every single day. And so doesn't it make sense that when you design a distillery and you operate it, and you taste the spirit that's coming off that still, and you taste it when it's come out of cask, and you marry those casks together and you taste it again, it only tastes right when it tastes like the sea a little bit,
Yeah, I agree with you completely. And it's always funny, like there's this massive placebo effect affecting every single person that enjoys spirits globally, those mezcals, those bourbons. And it's really fascinating. I really kind of love delving into that side of things. And with Wick, it's no change in that. It was one of the biggest herring ports. We had over 1,400 boats operating out of it at one point. It was massive. There's no roads running to it until the 1920s. So there was just an isolated town in the north end of Scotland that was just fishing incessantly.
So does that mean all the whiskey and all of the barley and all the barrels were going in and out by boat?
Yeah, everything up until the 1920s, and even then, you still had a pocket of distilleries in Speyside, etc. But business passing through Wick it wasn't happening, right? The business was port to port. So everything would have been coming in via boats.
Wow, that's incredible. Hey? Yeah, maturation on boats as well. So where would the boats go down? Would they go down to Inverness then, or where would they go into?
They would go all the way down into even London. They'd go around the north end as well, so coming into places in Ireland as well, into Europe constantly. So the whole idea behind Pulteney was a guy called William Johnson Pulteney, who was responsible for formalising, who had established the fisheries department, who was responsible for formalising the fisheries, especially on the East Coast, which was getting hounded by the Dutch, the Belgians, etc. And the idea was to formalise those fishing routes, and that's what he did. And Wick was one of those first harbours that he established, along with Thomas Telford, who's a very well-known name in the UK, less so abroad. And to link William Johnson Pulteney into the States, where we're going to go very, very soon, is he actually brokered a deal in New York State and actually owned and ran and operated over 1 million acres. And if you go and Google Images, there's a place called Bath in New York State that has Pulteney Park that is named after Johnson Pulteney. So really influential guy, but all of those boats would have been traveling across Europe, into Ireland, around the north coast, down into London, in small quantities, I would argue, but yeah, definitely operating in that capacity.
Yeah, interesting. So, what does the distillery look like today? How has it changed in the last 10 or 15 years? I mean, not necessarily kind of physically changed, but in terms of the product range and what you're producing, what you're bottling now.
Yeah. Back to 1826, our postage stamp, what the hell? The footprint has not changed. So we've built up, but we've not been able to build out because Pulteney Town Wick was literally enveloped the distillery. So we've built up, and obviously capacity's increased massively since the 1800s. But in terms of the range that we've developed, this Coastal series was one of the kind of big innovations that we ran, because so many people tried to fight me over the 17 and 21-year-old, which were just incredible whiskies. And there was this formalization of the range. But the Coastal series was the first time where I was really happy that we were eventually actually giving some attention to the range. Because I love Old Pulteney, and it's not a biased thing to say that it inspires a lot of love from a lot of people globally. And a lot of people say it's that one of their favorite whiskies and the ones that got them into it because it had that texture, that difference to it. But the Coastal series was something that allowed us to kind of strengthen and show ourselves a little bit, our cask warehousing, our wood policy, Stuart Harvey and the blending team, how we can we have good stock and we have something that we can create that's different, it's unique, it's weird, it's funky. And the objective behind this is a limited edition. It was to draw attention back to that core range and show that we're still producing quality whiskey, but we hadn't done a lot in a while. So seeing something like the Coastal series come out was really exciting for me, and really cool to be part of the development of it as well from a liquid point of view.
So what whiskies have you got within that Coastal series umbrella?
2 currently, with the plan to bring out 2 more. So originally it was Pinot de Charente, which was the first one. So working with, Pinot. So working with white and red grape Pinot casks, and then finishing or further maturing, I would argue. And then this one that we're tasting as a late Christmas present video tonight, or today, but you don't know what time it is who's watching this, is Port cask. So it was Douro Valley port between Port Barriques and Port Pipes that was further matured in.
Nice. And so what's the sort of full bio of that whiskey? Is it finished in the port cask, or is it full term, or is it a mixture of full term and 100% bourbon? How does all that look?
So it's a finish. It starts in American oak or ex-bourbon casks, all refill. I think there's some first and third for continuity, but all majority second fill. And then we're re-racking them. The finishing aspect for me is like seasoning foods. Further maturation's adding an ingredient, right? It's adding something that's genuinely impacting either the color, the flavor, more importantly, the aroma and palate of that whiskey. So for me, the Coastal series was all about further maturation as opposed to just finishing, despite the fact that this only took about 6 to 9 months in the port casks. Whereas the Pinot de Charente, it took us, actually considering how tight the casks were, it was actually years we spent in those. But it was all about focusing on what we wanted to achieve with it as opposed to time in cask. So with the port, it's American oak, ex-American oak, bourbon casks, re-racked into port pipes and port barriques.
Is there an age statement on there or not? No?
No, and that was actually a deliberate decision. We ummed and awed about that for a while, and ultimately the decision was focused on the casks that we were using as opposed to putting an age statement on it, because we don't necessarily get the benefit of having conversations like this all the time, every time someone picks it up to say, is it 12, 13, 14, 15, etc. But for the benefit, they're all around 11 to 13 years old. So that's what we're sitting in. That's the main area. But the idea was that we wanted to focus on the casks, the flavors, the profile, as opposed to, this is the 18-year-old, this is the 15-year-old, this is the 12-year-old, right? Because we also want to sustain a price point that was pretty continuous between all 4 of them.
You're a bit like Craig Ellicky in that you kind of like dealing prime numbers, I think. 11, 13, 17. It's I like unconventional numbering. It's cool. But I don't even know if you're aware of it then when you're saying 11, 13. But anyway, God, well that's so what there's 2 more coming. What are they going to be?
Oh, I can't say.
I can't say. Okay.
It's more to secrecy, but we're pretty much ready with the 3rd one. I was tasting some of that 6 odd months ago now, which is really exciting. But to give you a clue, the whole idea behind the Coastal series was to work with other coastal producers of liquid and further mature in their casks. So that's I can see your brain.
Okay, got you. So it's port from Douro, got you, and then
Yeah.
you've got
The Charente from the Charente region.
right,
Okay. Yeah.
So we can start narrowing this down if we wanted to. Dan, if I'd known this before, I would have done a little bit of pre-work and thought a little bit more about it, so I could put you on the spot. But okay, cool. That's amazing. Like I say, I'm always going to be championing Pulteney, and I think it is just because it's one of those whiskies that really stands on its own. I think, with a handful of other distilleries, it's one where you've got a genuine chance of picking it out in a blind tasting as being Old Pulteney. And you can't say that about many distilleries in Scotland, I don't think. Not honestly, anyway.
But it has that unique touch to it as well.
Yeah, it really does. Cool. Well, look, hang on, because we're going to talk about Bluegrass now and bring in Maggie and Ben. Hey, guys. How you doing?
Hey, we're doing well. How are you all doing?
Right, let me sort this out. Don't worry. Otherwise, you would have had to have got very close to each other.
I know, really.
Oh, well, look, thanks so much for joining us from Kentucky, where it is 3 in the afternoon, did you say? 3:30?
Yeah.
And the day is well underway. What's the weather like there?
Rainy and cold. So
same as here.
Yeah. Probably similar to your all's weather,
I was about to say, I was like, yeah. Unfortunately, I mean, I wish it was a few degrees colder so it would snow at this point,
Do you get much snow there?
We do. Yeah, usually it doesn't kick in until January, but we've already had a couple light dustings of snow. Yesterday was beautiful and sunny. Today, rainy and cold, and so it's a bit of a roller coaster in Kentucky. So,
well, roller coasters are good. The roller coaster that I live in the south of the UK is very boring. It's slow and it's grey and it's wet and it stays like that for about 6 months.
Yeah, we need the change of seasons. We need the hot, the cold. I mean, we're
Yeah, well, that's
the healthy. Yeah. We could fun in Glasgow. Just getting cold.
This is so British of us just talking about the weather. Or complaining about the weather. So, Bluegrass Distillery. This is really cool to be featuring you guys. I think since we don't know you, it'd be best to maybe kick off with the story, because you've not been what are you, like 10, 12 years old now, something like that?
Correct. Yeah. So we were founded in 2012. We started distilling at a very, very small scale in 2013 on a pot still, which we're still distilling in today. And we released our first product probably in 2015, started doing tours. Our original location, which we're not at today, and we'll talk about that, but our original location is in Lexington, Kentucky. So right in central Kentucky. We're downtown in an urban environment. We have about 4,000 square feet there, within which we distill, we age barrels, we give tours, we do it all in this small location. So we've been distilling there for the past 12 years at this point.
Nice. So what's it like being kind of one of the new kids on the block in Kentucky? Because obviously there's some serious distilling pedigree and some massive distilleries there as well, some big names, and you're new and relatively small. How does that feel?
Well, I'll take a swing that Maggie, I'm sure, has her own perspective, but it's been great for us. One cool thing about being where we are is we are on the Kentucky Craft Bourbon Trail. So we get the benefit of visitors that are coming here to visit one of the heritage distilleries that you're all familiar with, Buffalo Trace Woodford Reserve. But when they come here, they want to see something unique that maybe they don't have at home. And so we've benefited from that tourism, that just coming through our small distillery downtown for years now, basically seeing what it looks like when you first get started and you're doing everything by hand and it's all manual. And then in the afternoon, their tour guide will take them to Buffalo Trace and see what it looks like when you're, dominating the world. So it's like you see the full spectrum of distilling. But I'm sure,
Yeah. I mean, I think so, 95% of the world's bourbon is still produced here in Kentucky. So it is very interesting perspective for us. Where we're located, we're about, Ben talked about Buffalo Trace. they're about 20 minutes up the road from us, as is Woodford Reserve, and a handful of other, Wild Turkey, all of that. You drive 20 minutes and you're at these massive distilleries that people know all across the world. And so it's interesting, but in the past few years, I've been with the company since 2017. The bourbon trail's really taken off, and like Ben mentioned, that's been really great for us because people are here and then they come find something that they don't know of. And then also, craft has taken off too in the past 6, 7, 8 years. So we can do things that they can't do. So there are some areas, even where we're surrounded by all these big names, it helps bring people in. It helps introduce the world to bourbon. I know Buffalo Trace just opened a tasting room in London. So all of that helps us. We can kind of piggyback off of what they're doing, but bring a new perspective as a craft distillery. And even for craft, with that, everyone thinks, 10, 12 years, you all are new, compared to these heritage brands is what we call them here in Kentucky. But compared to a lot of craft distilleries, we've been around. We've just been doing it on a really small scale. And a lot of these craft distilleries have grown 3 or 4 times since 2012. And like Ben alluded to, we've gone from very, very small to our new location where we're at now, which is very large.
Yeah. Are you still producing just in pot stills, or have you got a beer stripper there as well now?
So yeah, currently we are still producing in pot stills, but we're about a month away from firing up our beer still, column still here in Midway, Kentucky, which is 15 minutes west of where we are, Lexington. That's where Maggie and I are currently in Midway, Kentucky. But we've been working on this new distillery location for about 2 years to help scale, our product pipeline so that we can put out more of the bourbons that we love, do more finishing, do more blending. But to your question, yeah, we're about to transition to more column distillation.
How do you think, if at all, that's going to affect the flavor of the product? What are the sort of considerations there when transitioning into that kind of distillery apparatus from pots?
Yeah, so the process obviously is very different in terms of the flavor profile. So we only hope to improve and refine the control we have around our flavor profile. Our column still that we're installing, which I've been down there all day, like wiring up sensors and wiring up the mill for the grinder today. It's been a crazy day, but it has some really unique attributes where we can basically bring fusel oils back into our feed that we're pulling off the stillet. So we can change the mouthfeel. We can change what fusel oils we're pulling into our finished product. And so we're going to get to experiment with that control to basically, honor everything we've done before, but hopefully continue to make it better, more refined, more consistent. But we all cut our teeth on pot stills, and I mean that mouthfeel, that flavor profile, it will definitely influence everything we do going forward.
And going forward, will everything you do go through the beer stripper, or will you continue to do some 100% pot still stuff, to sort of diversify? Yeah,
so our bulk SKUs or our primary SKUs, I should say, will switch over to the column. We will definitely do some experimental distillation on the pot still. We actually do have a 500-gallon doubler that we could use as a pot still as well out here. So we'll use that as, I don't want to say R&D, but maybe smaller batch things we're experimenting with, like potentially single malt, American single malt.
Watch out, Stuart.
Fine, I know it's there. It's there. Congratulations, guys.
Yeah. That's
last week.
Last week they just solidified the statute on what it.
Oh no, that's us done.
Yeah.
Never.
Well, that'd be an interesting thing to track. And yes, Stuart, if you ever want to come over and be a consultant to us, we'd love it. So.
Oh yeah, no problem. I'll take that. I'll take the weather any day.
I think Stuart's going to look at installing some stripping columns and make some corn whiskey, right?
Yeah, I mean, why not, right?
Scottish bourbon.
Scottish bourbon doesn't have the same ring to it, right? American single malt still sounds a bit better.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah. So speaking of corn, I know you make a lot of different things there. But so with your straight bourbon, what's the mash bill look like?
You want to take that?
Our straight bourbon. So with our bourbons, we do a mash bill of 95% corn. We have 3 mash bills that we do. We have a 75 corn with 21% rye and then 4% malted barley. A wheated bourbon, which is the same mixture of 75 corn, 21 wheat, and then 4% malted barley. And then we have one product, which probably 2 years out from being able to mass distribute that, which is a blue corn bourbon. So that's a wheated bourbon as well. Same 75, 21, 4. And we actually on site grow the blue corn. So we have 62 acres out here and we grow the blue corn on site. We also grow a winter wheat on site. So that's our bourbon mash bill. Is always that high corn 75 with the rye or wheat and then the malted barley.
Oh, nice. Cool. That's great. You're growing the corn as well.
Yeah. So, for us, again, being craft, we're also trying to be, sustainable and really give our visitors who are on the bourbon trail, that grain to glass experience or seed to glass really out here. So it's something that's neat, for people to see, but then also, when Ben's talking about our new still and how we can have more control over it. Well, when we're watching the farmers plant that grain into the ground and then harvest it, we're having control from beginning to end, which is something that's new for us now that we're out here. Midway's not really the country, but somewhere where you can have 60 plus acres. We were previously / currently in Lexington, Kentucky, which is the second largest city in Kentucky. So it's much different out here. But yeah, growing the grain's been really neat and something that sets us apart as well.
What can you tell us a bit about what Kentucky looks like now in respect of the growing number of craft distilleries? Because it wasn't that long ago, I guess, that there was only like 6 or 8 distilleries making bourbon in Kentucky, or heritage distilleries, as you call it.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm guessing there's a lot more. So what do those numbers look like? And also geographically, because Kentucky, most of the distilleries traditionally have all been kind of within a pretty small area. Are they kind of dispersing all across the state now? Or is it still kind of in that sort of the area you're in?
You know the numbers by chance?
I don't know the numbers. I know I feel like every other week there's a new distillery and there's a lot of announcements of distilleries coming. There's a lot of what we call non-distiller producers or NDPs that are, they put out a press release saying that they are going to start a distillery. So a lot of times I don't know how many distilleries are open and running now because there's a lot of press about so-and-so distillery getting up and running, but I think it's like 60 plus or something that I think that are recognized as part of the Kentucky Distillers Association. And there's probably more than that. And yeah, it's spread out across the state. So they kind of redone what they call the Bourbon Trail. It used to be segmented by craft and the larger distilleries or the heritage distilleries, and now it's separated by regions. So I think there's 5 or 6 regions that they have the state divided in for the distilleries. So instead of coming and trying to circle the whole state and visit, 40 plus distilleries, you can go region by region, or if you just want to visit one region, whatever. Also promotes safe drinking and driving.
A lot of drivers do that.
Yeah, that was not the case. I mean, pre-COVID, we still had people coming in like, can I, try one bourbon and on to the next, I need to get my stamp and keep going. And so that's changed. But yeah, it's statewide now. They're all over, but they're also all over the country. The number of distilleries in Kentucky, I think, is number 12 compared to the rest of the US. So even though we still produce a high percentage of bourbon, there are 12 states that have more distilleries than we do.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? I mean, I'm pretty sure New York State has more distilleries than Scotland, whiskey distilleries in Scotland, and then all the states on the West Coast are just rammed full of distilleries, right? Like Washington, Oregon, California. It's nuts. I wrote an American whiskey book about 6 years ago, and we traveled to 32 states, I think, visiting distilleries in them, and it's crazy. Like Stuart and I were talking earlier about the kind of how a place stamps its sort of footprint on a spirit, and you travel around the US, even if you only drank bourbon, you didn't sort of delve into wheat whiskies and rye and malts and smokes and all that kind of thing, you would still find that there's noticeable differences between each sort of region. Speaking of which, you mentioned you can do things that the bigger producers can't do because you're a little bit smaller and younger and a bit more dynamic. And I'm just sort of wondering, how would you sort of define your house style? Is there something, that in a blind tasting, you'd be able to pick yours out amongst anyone else's? Is there something in the flavor or the production processes that lends itself to the flavor that makes it Bluegrass Spirits unique?
I think there's a range across our different SKUs. Like I think Maggie mentioned the Blue Corn mash bill is a unique mash bill that has its own, nutty, savory profiles, actually straight off the still, and then that manifests, as it ages in a very unique way. But we've done a lot of barrel finishing. We've done a lot of barrel finishing with spirits, with wood finishes. So we've experimented a lot. I don't think there's one attribute, other than we try to uphold just really good products so that people want to try the next thing we come out with. We've done one of our other SKUs, other than the rye, is a toasted oak, where we're finishing basically a 4 to 5 year old bourbon. The secondary grain is rye in a toasted oak barrel. So we launched that maybe 2.5 years ago. And so that kicked off a lot of our experimentations with just finished products, just because, our team, we're a small team, but we're, everyone's got an idea of the next release we should put out. And we go through a democratic process to decide on which one we should do. And then we do experiment. But at the end of the day, we're attempting to always just uphold a high level of quality. Maggie, do you have some?
No, I think some of our products are more unique than others. Our standard mash bill of, high corn with rye, that's very standard. And like we mentioned, there's a lot of brands. There's a lot of new brands. I think that's kind of one thing that we're seeing over here. I'm not as familiar with the UK market, but because we're so new to it. But we're seeing there's a lot of brands on the shelf. And so that's why we've looked at differentiating ourselves in terms of different barrel finishes, because it is hard. I mean, with bourbon, and rye and whatever, you're really confined to what you can do. I mean, you can't add any coloring, you can't add any flavoring. It's going into a new barrel. So that barrel finishing is really one way that we're trying to stand out, trying to do unique finishes. We have a vermouth finish, kind of a rye whiskey. It's like a
Manhattan.
A Manhattan in a bottle.
Yeah.
You don't see much of those. We have a Sauternes finish. But our toasted oak has done really well. And that's something that, there's been more of those that have come into the market. So now we're already thinking, okay, what's next? Because we're trying with a lot of our products that aren't as niche, like the Blue Corn, to say, okay, how can we, find some finish that's unique, that will be really good, that not everyone's doing. And so I think that's an area right now that we're trying to differentiate ourselves.
I know a guy who has some port casks that had some Scotch whiskey in them and previously had port in. Stuart, but I think he's got distracted.
Oh, no, me. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we can do a little deal here right now. I'll broker it. I only want 5%. Okay.
Yeah.
The best I can do is two.
Me though, and that's again, you're talking about craft. It's like, yeah, let's get those barrels. Let's do 2 of them. Let's put it out. We have 30,000 visitors a year in our old space. alone as a sample size. So when we come out with a new product, you know, we get people in on the bourbon trail, try this out. Do they buy it? Do they like it? What feedback do we get? And then we can scale it and take it to market. So our research, you know, we get it for free from our visitors. So yeah, you know, or we'll try a few barrels and doesn't move. We're like, okay, on to the next. So
that's really interesting.
All right, let's finish this up. All three of you, a question. What is your favorite product in your respective ranges, and how do you like to drink it?
I think it's I mean, the cliche of choosing between your children, there is definitely a favorite. I think the 15, like, I always attribute this question, I equate it to like desert island. If I had one for the rest of my life, what is it going to be, right? It doesn't have to be your favorite, but like the go-to, probably 15-year-old Old Pulteney. It's spicy, it's nutty. You can still see the minerality. The cask maturation hasn't dominated it too much. There's that best of both worlds for it. Yeah, 15-year-old Pulteney for me.
Nice, that is a great whiskey. Not a prime number though, but
I know. I'll do better next time.
Maggie, Ben?
I'll take the first one. Yeah, so for me, talking about which kid, you know, metaphorically looking at it, like which kid's your favorite, like to me, it changes on the day of the week.
Kids, yeah.
Or in our SKUs, it's really seasonal for me. So like this time of year when it's colder, you know, a little rainy, maybe we get the fire going at night. Our toasted oak, which is one of the products I mentioned, which is basically a rye as a secondary grain, but we add that toasted barrel finish on it to add some sweetness on top of the spiciness. It's, to me, that's my like go-to these days, just because it feels like you're sitting at a campfire or, you know, like cozy and curled up and that kind of thing. So it is a bit seasonal though. I alternate, but right now that's the one that
and you just drink it. Do you drink it on ice or do you mix it or straight?
Yeah, I'll do it neat. Just depending, you know, how large of a pour I need that day. But
do you drink it on ice or not?
I will. Yeah, I definitely will. If it's, you know, if it's not a nightcap, if I'm just having a cocktail, like sitting around chatting with people, I will do it. I will do it on ice, and I'm not ashamed to admit it. It changes the experience, and we bottle it at 100 proof, so it's a pretty high proof point to drink, you know, more than one neat. So I will drop an ice cube in it to dilute it a little, open it up, and you know, chill it off a little too. So
nice. Maggie, you've had longer to think than the other guys, so you're up now.
I know, and I don't have any kids, so I can't really play this like.
I don't have kids either, Maggie.
I'm like, well, I do agree with Ben. Yeah, I go kind of seasonally too. And I know the product that you all have is our rye whiskey, but that's my go-to, at least this time of year. Our rye is at 110 proof, so it's high proof. I think the cask strength on most of those are about 114 proof, so it's just barely proof down. Especially around the holidays, I'm really into cocktails. So I prefer rye in all of my cocktails over a bourbon. I drink my bourbon even with ice. But for a cocktail, I like our rye, and I've been in a big cocktail kick right now as we enter the holidays, all the holiday parties and stuff. So, and I have a little bit of bourbon fatigue right now, believe it or not. So I'm going to go with the rye.
What cocktails are you making? Is it Manhattans and old fashions or anything else?
Yeah, Manhattans, old fashions. I'll do my espresso martini with some rye in it. Really whatever. But yeah, that's kind of my go-to. Like even when I go to, you know, the bar up the street, if I get a cocktail that normally has bourbon, I usually will sub rye just to get a little bit more of that bolder spice flavor to it. We don't really drink, you know, scotches over here, and single malts are so new for us. So those are my two like whiskey options usually. So, but I sub rye for bourbons most of the time, especially this time of year when it's cooler.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I like rye as well. That dryness that you get and spice. And yeah, the toasted oak thing is sounding really cool as well. Yeah. Well, look, guys, that was fantastic. And really appreciate your time. nice Christmas tasting for us all. Get us in the festive spirit.
Yeah.
Stuart, thanks for coming back for a third time. Glutton for
Anytime.
punishment.
Anytime.
Yeah, and Maggie and Ben, good luck with the new beer stripping column and everything you got going on. Congratulations on growing and doing so well and making delicious whiskey.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
All right. See you later, everyone.
Bye.
Yeah.
Cheers.